Hey y'all, it's Ginger from Jen and Clever Studios. Today we're going to be doing the paint along for our cute little deer with the Plaid background. So go ahead, grab your canvas and your kit and your supplies, and I'll meet you right back here. Now, you might want to pause right here. I've cheated a little bit and painted my entire canvas black, because that's where we're going to start, is with a black canvas. Now, I would definitely tell you to go ahead, paint your canvas black, and then maybe go get a snack. You want that to dry because you want it to be nice and dry and ready for your next step, which my next step is going to be taking a little bit of my brown paint, and I'm going to give my deer his face, his head. Now it's going to be a nice kind of soft round shape. It's going to be a little bit narrower at the top. It's going to widen out a little bit because our deer is kind of a sweet little cartoon fellow. He's awfully sweet. So we're going to paint all that in and fill that in so he's nice. Now the black will give a nice kind of shadow where our paint gets a little thin. So I'm going to fill in my little deer head here and kind of round it out. Now remember, your deer does not have to look exactly like my deer. In fact, that's part of the fun of this whole experiment, is you never know. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give him a neck. Now I'm actually going to paint kind of straight down to the edge of my canvas. And I'm going to decide that his neck is kind of skinny right here. I'm going to fill that in and broaden it out just a little bit so he has some little shoulders. And you can take that brown on down around the back of your gallery wrapped canvas if you want to. I'm painting flat because I imagine everybody doesn't have an easel at home to hold up their painting. And also it's just a good way to film. So I've got him all kind of painted that way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him some little ears, and I'm going to make sure that his ears kind of come up off his head. We want to leave some room in the middle. Now he's got some big ears. So, and they're kind of a leaf shape because we want to leave room for those little antlers, because I know how important antlers are. And we're going to fill them in just a little bit. Our little buddy deer right here, we're going to fill those little ears in. I'm using the flat part of my brush. So, and I kept it pretty small and connected where we're putting in ears. Now I'm going to wash my brush in my water and clean it off. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to get some white paint, and I'm going to come on either side of his head, and I'm going to give him a little curve here for one antler. I'm going to give him a little curve over here for the other side. And I'm going to paint it just a little bit thicker as it goes down toward his head. Right there we go. It's okay if we get a little brown in there. I just did, because we are painting wet on wet, which means I'm not letting paint dry in between. And their antlers are a little thicker where they touch. I'm just going to kind of feather that in a little. And I'm actually not going to wash my brush. I'm just going to dry it off on my towel. And I'm going to blend just a little bit right here where this wet brown paint is, where my white paint for my antlers kind of comes in. So it all kind of blends together just like that. Okay. And then I'm going to give him some little parts to come off of his antlers right there. We've got 1, 2, and they're also going to be narrower the further away they get from the base here. They don't have to be exactly the same on both sides. I think we've all seen some deer with some interesting racks over the years. And there we go. So now our baby deer, our little cartoon deer, has antlers. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take some of that white paint, bring it over here. I'm going to bring a little brown paint because we're going to lighten it up for his face. Just a little bit. And I'm still not giving it a ton of dry time in between. I'm going to lighten that up just a little bit more. It's totally up to you. Remember, these are just suggestions. This is not hard and fast rules. There we go. That's kind of the color I want right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down below his ear. And I'm going to do one side that kind of curves in this way. I'm going to take it all the way to the bottom of his face. And I'm going to do it this way on this side. And I'm going to paint the outside edges and come all the way around because we're going to paint his face a little bit lighter. And I'm going to fill that in, give him a nice tawny face. I'm going to shorten it a little bit because his mouth's going to go right there. Using the flat part of my brush to get good coverage. And you can blend this as much as you want, but there he goes. He's got his cute little face going right there. Now you can also come down with just a little bit of that same color right here on the chest and give him a little lightness right there. Just like that. And if you want to switch to your smaller brush, you can. I'm going to go ahead and just keep this brush, and I'm going to give him some little dots up here on his forehead. And they're going to be kind of soft and round. Actually, I think I may go ahead and switch to that finer brush, which has walked off. There it is. Okay. So I've got this finer little brush just to kind of help with those details. That's what these brushes are great for. And I'm going to put 3 little spots right up here on his forehead. Clean that one up just a little bit. And so we're going to add a few little details with our black. Now, it might be a little hard to see right now because our ears are right up against a black background, but I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of black on each ear, just a little bit, because we're going to tip those ears in black. I've left a little brown showing to kind of help myself later on because we're going to add a background later. And then we're going to give him a nose. Now you can give him a round nose. I have all of a sudden become very enamored with a heart-shaped nose, but your nose can be a circle if you want it to be. So I'm going to fill in his little nose right there. So he's got a nose, and he's got his little black tipped ears. And then we're going to go ahead and give him a little bit of a face. So what I'm going to do is right here where the point of his nose is, I'm going to bring it down just a little fine line. And then I can give him a little mouth. You can make him smile. You can make him a little serious. It's totally up to you. And then I'm going to come onto either side and paint a circle. And those are going to be his eyes right there. Fill those in really good. It's okay if you get a little brown in there. We're going to fill that in really nice and neat. And I might just give him some little eyebrows. You can decide if you want to keep those or not. So now he's got eyebrows. All right. Now we're going to switch back to our bigger brush. And this is where the fact that our black background is going to kind of come in handy, and it's going to help us a lot. So I've got my brush, and I'm going to get my red paint. And I'm going to paint. Now, if you can see, the black sort of shows a little bit through this, and I'm going to go right up next to the deer. But the black background is dry, which this is just going to help give us some nice texture. Think about those fleecy flannel shirts we all get to wear in the winter, and that's kind of what we're going for here. And I'm going to fill this in. I'm using big, nice up and down strokes on the flat side of my brush. And you can take it all the way around if you want to the edges, or you can just stop. It's totally up to you. It's whatever you're comfortable with. I love that sound. I'm going to tell you guys that probably every time. I love the sound of a brush on canvas. And because this is craft acrylic, it really, really, really can move pretty quickly and dries pretty quickly, and we're kind of using that to our advantage. And you can see if I can kind of brush this over the canvas, you can hear that rustly sound. That's kind of dry brushing, but we're gonna let this kind of be nice and thick because we want this to have a really pretty plaid texture. Now, if at any point you feel like you're done and you don't want to continue on with the plaid, that's okay. I'm going to go right up to the edges. And if you make a mistake, guys, remember, you can always let it dry and paint over it. It's always fixable. I definitely subscribe to that whole Bob Ross philosophy of there's no such thing as mistakes. There's only happy little accidents. Sometimes we do something and it doesn't turn out right, and sometimes that's the best thing that could happen, and other times we just learn that we're not going to do that again. I know that I almost changed the tutorial for this little fellow to painting the red first before the black. And then I remembered that I really loved the texture that this gave. Now, when you get into these little areas, because I've covered the big areas pretty quickly with the flat part of my brush, and I'm trying to keep my brush strokes nice and up and down, like I may come in here and get really close, but then I'm going to try to keep them up and down because it really helps a lot with the way our textures go. And it's going to give it a nice look, because if our brush strokes kind of go all over the place, it's kind of noticeable. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of using the flat of my brush, I'm going to use the very tip to get into these really small spots right here. And it's okay if you can't get into those. It's perfectly fine. But you've also got that tiny little fine tip brush, and that's what it can come in handy for sometimes. And so I'm going around my edges and in between my antlers. Got a lot of red paint going on here in a minute. We're going to add a little detail with that red paint in just a minute. This is one of those pictures that has a really limited number of colors in it, but it turns out just really cool. It's one of my favorites. So I'm going to get in here really close and kind of fill in those areas too. We're almost there, guys. Using the edge of my brush, I'm going around his ears, and I'm getting down here around his head. And I'm just going nice and careful. Okay. So I've got him nicely painted. I'm kind of taking a look to see if there's any areas where I might want to add a little more red on top, because I can see when my paint gets less shiny that it is definitely dry. I think I've got a little white there that I want to cover over real quick. So we've got him there. Now, before I go on to anything else, I'm actually just going to take my brush, and I'm not going to clean it, and I'm going to get a little bit of white, and I'm going to rub that brush in it, and it's going to give me a really nice pink. Now, this is just an additional thing. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but you can actually give him a little rosiness on his cheeks. Totally up to you. And we're just going to smush that in a circle. Give him a nice little kind of pink rosy cheek effect. And now I'm going to wash my brush. And we're going to start putting in the stripes for our checkerboard, for our buffalo check pattern. So here I've got my deer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush, dip the flat side right here into some black paint, and I'm going to start a little above the bottom, and it's totally up to you how wide your stripes are going to be, and I'm just going to pull that across until I run into my deer, and I'm going to make that as thick as I want it. And in order to make it look like it goes behind him, I'm going to hold my brush above the deer, and when I get to the other side, I'm just going to drop it back down. You can kind of come in and fix that. You can use a piece of paper if you want to help you do a straight edge, but I kind of like it freehand. My next one is going to be kind of lined up with the middle of his cheek. I'm going to come right up to the edge here and paint that in. I made that a little thick. but that's okay. We've got lots of cool textures here. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of lay my brush down and bring it across. Might have overlapped there a little bit, but I've got some extra paint I can come up and touch that with. And then I'm going to come up to about the bottom of the ears, which we got to come back and touch up those ears in a minute. So I'm doing a smidge there. I'm going to go across, do it right there. Okay, when we get these stripes done, I'll come back and touch up those ears. So I'm actually going to go above the ear for this next one, and I'm going to run right into the tip of that little antler right there, and I'm going to skip it and just put a little bit of black there, and then line it up and keep going across because I want it to be kind of fun and freehand, and it's okay if it's got a little wrinkliness to it. And I'm going to do one more. Okay, I'm going to go right in there. And my very last one's going to be on the top edge of the paper. Oops. See, right there, folks. I went over the top of that antler, so I'm probably going to let that dry for a minute, or I may just be stubborn and go back and touch it up. But I'm going to wash my brush. And actually what I'm going to do is the color that I did his face, got a little bit of that left, and I'm going to actually come over here and do it inside his ears, just to kind of give it a little more detail. And it's okay if you can see a little of the dark brown through it. That's kind of the fun and the textures that we've got. It's a very rustic sort of texture going on. So I'm going to do that right there. Now his ears are painted in and he's got his spots, and since this is a checkerboard pattern, we're actually going to go the other way now. So we're going to go up and down, and those will go really fast. So I'm going to come over about an inch, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did right there. We're going to kind of lose it right there, and there's one. And then I'm going to come over right about, actually it's going to be right about here. And you're not going to see much of it because it technically kind of goes behind the head a little bit. And then I'm going to skip over here and do it again. Okay, making sure that I'm kind of getting it all lined up. There's a tiny bit right there. And then once again, we're kind of over here, which I'm still going to come back and hit that antler again. So we're going down, 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 and line that way, just like that. And then we're going to do one more, which is going to be right here. And it's okay if it's not the best, most even job, because it's kind of fun that way, because they'll definitely all be definitely unique and individual. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our black, quite a bit of our black actually, we're going to move it on our palette over here. We're going to take a little bit of white, and we're going to make a gray, and we're shooting for kind of a medium gray, so somewhere halfway between black and white. We don't want it to be too light, but we want to make sure we've got enough paint, and we want to make sure there's a big difference between our black and our white. I'm really going to wipe my brush off because I've got a lot of paint on there, and that can be a problem. I'm going to go ahead and take that over here with my paper towel and clean that up really quickly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint these lines right here and right here, and I'm going to leave a little square in the middle, and that's going to be our buffalo check pattern. So I'm going to cover these over, and it'll blend a little bit, and you can kind of see we'll just leave the black squares in the middle. kind of like the little variations you get in the paint colors right there. That's really pretty. It's one of my favorite things about painting is all the different little variations and edges you get when you paint. That kind of stuff just makes me really happy, and I like to see it in other people's artwork. Make sure I don't get all of his ear in there, so we've actually still got that ear going on. There we go. Now, if you have to walk away from your painting while you're working, definitely put the lids on your paint containers. And also, you can spray a little water on this and cover it with some plastic wrap or wax paper, or slide it into a gallon Ziploc bag, and it should keep for quite a while. And you can also like pop a slightly wet paper towel in the Ziploc bag with it, and that will help it not dry up. But if it's pretty thick paint, it should stay for a few hours. If it's pretty thin, it may have already started to dry. You just never know. Depends on a lot of things, like how warm it is where you're at, if it's, if there's a lot of humidity. You can definitely just kind of mist it or put it in with a damp paper towel into a Ziploc bag, and that will help it all kind of stay fresh. If you need to walk away for some reason, or if you just quite get caught up in your artwork and you kind of miss out on what you're supposed to be doing. So there we go. So I've got my little deer buddy here. Now we're going to add a few little details to him. I'm going to do it with my detail brush. So, and these are totally up to you. So what I'm going to do is get my detail brush in some white paint, and I'm going to come and put a little shine in his eyes. And I'm going to make 2 dots, a bigger one and a little one. And you want to do them on the same side on each eye. And then I'm going to put a little shine on his nose right there, his itty bitty cutie pie nose, which I'm totally in love with. And then I'm going to take my detail brush, and I'm actually going to outline his face right here where the 2 colors meet, and give that a little more detail. Like I said, you can use as much detail or as little as you want. It's totally up to you. And if you want to wait until everything's dry to do that as well, that's totally up to you. I'm actually going to go down here on his chest and add a little white outline there too. I'm just adding some little details that are just going to make it pop. Those little highlighty details are the fun part of all this. So now he's got his antlers and his ears. And if you want to, and you should have plenty of black paint for this, I'm cleaning the white off my brush. I'm actually just going to go back in. Oh, I forgot. I told you guys I was going to retouch that antler because I couldn't stand it. Got a real thick coat of paint up here, and I'm just going to fill that in and let those dry for a little while. Kind of clean up any edges where I may not like what I've done, or if I've gotten a little over. And you can leave him like this, and he's perfectly adorable. I'm probably going to come in really quickly with my fine brush, which these are a lot of fun. And notice I'm not pressing down too hard with this fine brush. I'm keeping it really lightly and just using the very, very tip of that brush, because I definitely don't want to get too far down in here. And I'm going to go around everything and just give it a nice, clean, graphic edge. And that's going to kind of help everything pop. Like I said, it's totally up to you if you want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and darken his mouth in just a little bit more because it's a little drier than it was. I'm going to come in here around his inner ear and line that out. And my paint's pretty thick on there, so it's pretty easy to just kind of swoop in real quick and do that, but definitely take your time. And there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little outlining up here on his dots, just so they stand out a little bit more. I like that nice clean finish of the black edge. Okay, and you can also outline his antlers if you want to, just to kind of clean up those edges. It's totally up to you. But like I said, you know me. I like these edges. I think they're really pretty. I think it just gives it a nice finish. And I know that's a little wet, so I'm going to be really careful right there. Got a little too much wet. Definitely let everything dry. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay. And I'm just letting it all kind of glide. And see, that gives me some nice clean little edges. And there we go. And just give him a quick chance to dry, and he's all done. And there's your happy little deer. Thanks so much for painting with me, guys. And just remember, the best life is a clever one.